I thought it was funny when I heard Hendrix play that intro because it was from the same song as the bass riff. That was a good thing to have. That let us know because Free and Black Sabbath were our rivals. That song was by Black Sabbath or All Right Now, and Free had it. Everyone used to hold their breath when they heard that name. It was just 4 easy notes from Smoke on the Water. They did more than just play the guitar. They also talked, screamed, whispered, and sometimes cried. To be fair, Ritchie Blackmore is more than just a famous guitarist. He is a complicated person, a musical genius who is obsessed with having complete control over everything, but he keeps losing the people around him. Fans see him as a hero. He's a pain for his friends. He was so smart that the bands he led from Deep Purple to Rainbow were both great and doomed because of how smart he was. When the loud rock music got too much for him, he didn't think twice about leaving. He went into a dream world from the Renaissance where he played the lute and lived like a knight from another time. Who is Ritchie Blackmore? A strange artist who got lost in his own world, or a musical rebel who wouldn't settle for average? A man who can't love, or just the only one brave enough to be completely honest with himself, even if it means being very alone. Let's go into the life of a man who was brave enough to go against the whole music business for one reason. Truth doesn't have to please anyone. And music is truth. Childhood Ritchie Blackmore was born on April 14, 1945 in Weston-super-Mare, England. It is a quiet seaside town, and the gentle waves at the shore were very different from the musical storm he would one day cause. He didn't come from an artsy family. They didn't have a stage or any attention. Instead, they had working-class parents who were very strict and kept quiet. The Blackmore family moved to Heston, Middlesex when Blackmore was 2 years old. That's where he spent most of his youth. But when he turned 11, things really started. A rough and tough old man named his dad gave him his first guitar. It didn't come with any words of support. Instead, it came with a harsh order. If you want to learn, do it the right way. Don't mess around. There was no room for gut or being lazy. That's when Ritchie started years of classical guitar lessons, which was not what he had planned as a child growing up during the rock era. But those stiff, dry finger movements laid the groundwork for what people would later call a mix of Bach and Black Sabbath. But Ritchie was a rebel in class. He didn't like lessons that were too rigid, didn't care about materials, and often had problems with his teachers. That led to constant punishments and pulling out of school when he was 15. That would have been a fall for many. It was a way for him to get away from a system he didn't trust. Blackmore got a safe job as a radio technician at Heathrow Airport after he graduated from high school. But in the background he worked toward a different goal: to become the best guitarist in England. During the day he fixed radio devices. He played the guitar all night until his hands hurt. He wasn't having fun. He played because he had a spirit inside him. He was lucky that a great chance came his way. Big Jim Sullivan, who was one of the best session guitarists in the UK at the time, taught him. Not only did Sullivan teach Ritchie skill, but he also taught him discipline, which he wouldn't accept from anyone but music itself. But if skill was the bones, then feeling was the flesh. Blackmore was influenced by early musicians like Elvis Presley, Tommy Steele, and especially Hank B. Marvin of the Shadows. It was Marvin's smooth, dreamy tone that left a deep impression, and Blackmore's solos would always sound like that, even in the loudest rock songs. As a youth, Ritchie Blackmore quietly left without any luggage or goodbyes to start changing the way people thought about guitars. Other teens were dreaming of school crushes or summer vacations, start of career. The early years of Ritchie Blackmore's work were marked not by fame or the spotlight, but by a never-ending cycle of nameless bands, crowded recording studios, and dusty tours across England. Before he turned 16, Blackmore jumped right into the lively stream of British music in the early 1960s. He was like a lone wolf with steel nerves. He joined the band The Outlaws, which often worked with the strange producer Joe Meek. Ritchie learned how to make it in the studio by living in Meek's strange world of weird sound effects and sonic experiments. Don't mess up, play it right, and play quickly. But he learned something even more important as well. You have to be in charge if you want to be creative. He never stopped moving and getting better at what he did during those years. He played with Scream Lord Sutch, Neil Christian, Hines, and a lot of unknown backing acts who needed a skilled guitarist. Blackmore wasn't afraid to try new things, but he never stayed for long. It wasn't worth his time to him if the music wasn't sharp enough to make people jump. Ritchie went on tour in Germany at one point, where he became known for playing aggressively and having a cold, almost scary personality. People said that if the band couldn't keep up with one of his improvised riffs, he could ruin the whole show, but that didn't bother him. Blackmore was very clear about what he wanted, and he would never drop his standards to make other people happy. Even though he wasn't well known yet, his name was talked about behind closed doors in the guitar community. Need a scorcher of a riff? Talk to Blackmore. People in the music business both admired and feared him. Because he wasn't just good, he was also strict and wouldn't give in. By the middle of the 1960s, he was almost a member of the famous band the Yardbirds. But the chance passed them by. That might have been fate, because Blackmore would soon start his own band, Deep Purple, instead of adding to someone else's history. In 1968, Ritchie was asked to join a new rock group after a chance meeting with John Lord and Chris Curtis, who used to be in the band The Searchers. The group's first name was Roundabout, but they quickly changed it to Deep Purple, after a song that Ritchie's grandma loved. And then Deep Purple was formed, with Ritchie Blackmore at the center of their sound. It was like everything in his life had been building up to this point. Blackmore had gone from being a high school dropout hunched over a guitar in a crowded radio workshop, to being the architect of a musical age. He was on the verge of taking a big step forward. Success in your job. It was never easy for Ritchie Blackmore to fit in with Deep Purple. It was where he said he had complete power over sound. Blackmore was the one who pushed for the band to switch from trippy to hard rock. He didn't want nice tunes. He had to be in charge of every note if he wanted the music to sound like war. Deep Purple in rock 1970 was a big deal. Cover songs that float along are over. In their place is music that is fierce, muscular, and musically intense. Blackmore started making lines like Fortresses on Speed King, where his guitar tore through old rules. He tried something new with the guitar on Child in Time by combining traditional legato with haunting sustain. Blackmore wasn't playing to show off, that much was clear. He played to show something, driven by a fixation. Machine Head, one of the most important records in the history of hard rock, came out in 1972. The idea for Smoke on the Water came from a real accident, but Blackmore is said to have grown to hate the main riff because it was so easy. In his opinion, it was a dull and unoriginal riff that showed how he felt. He wasn't interested in getting things easily. Highway Star was the solo he was most proud of. He called it a concerto in the style of Bach, but with the speed and fire of rock. By adding harmonic minor scales, pedal tones and triad patterns, he made the guitar sound like a symphony. But even though the music hit epic heights, the band started to fall apart. Blackmore became cold and far away. Gillan, whose dramatic screams had become famous, got more and more upset with Blackmore's bossiness. Blackmore was very against John Lord's plans to add soul and funk to their sound. Blackmore had reached his limit by the time Deep Purple changed direction with Stormbringer in 1974. He quit when the band wouldn't record Black Sheep of the Family, a song he saw as a last warning. If Rainbow was a battlefield for creation, then Deep Purple would be its battlefield. Blackmore would be its unwavering king. Rainbow began with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, which he made with Ronnie James Dio and E-Elf members in 1975. It was clear from Man on the Silver Mountain that this wasn't just any rock. The riffs moved like horses, the voices were like prophecies, and the guitar was like a sword. But Blackmore wasn't happy. He thought that the E-Elf members were too normal for his ideas. Except for Dio, he fired them all after the first record. Rising, Rainbow's artistic peak, came out in 1976 and is thought to be one of the best heavy metal records of all time. The song Stargazer, which was almost 9 minutes long, mixed classical music, hard rock and Eastern epic tones. It was there that Blackmore turned his guitar into a string orchestra, and Dio into a person who told Bible stories. But there was a silent hell behind the brightness. Jimmy Bain plays bass. You had no idea when you'd be fired. It was scary to be in Rainbow, because you had to walk on a wire with a gun to your back. Tony Carey plays the piano. Everything Ritchie said was meant to be funny. Each and every one. One time, drummer Cozy Powell had to record a part 50 times. He told me, I had forgotten what I was up to. Blackmore was in charge of everything, from the sound to the stage lights, to the way hotel rooms were set up. Don't agree. You're done. Not good enough. You've been changed. The musical machine was great, but it lacked warmth. Rainbow began to change when Dio quit in 1979, because he didn't like how the band was going in terms of making money. Even though the Down-to-Earth record with Since You've Been Gone was a big hit, it wasn't really Rainbow. Blackmore hired Graham Bonnet, and then Joe Lynn Turner in the early 1980s. Both of their voices were better made for radio than for legend. Rainbow put out Difficult to Cure, which was attacked for not having enough depth, but was a big hit. In 1984, Blackmore shocked fans by getting back together with Deep Purple. 1984's Perfect Strangers showed that Blackmore was still putting himself in dangerous situations, but his relationship with Gillan was still bad.